that you need to build positive professional relationships with your students. You are their teacher. You are not their peer. Okay, so your relationship with your students need to be a student-teacher relationship and not a peer-to-peer relationship where you are their equal. Hello everyone, thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new here, my name is Emmy, and every week I will be sharing some beginner teaching tips and tricks that I've learned from over a decade of teaching. So today we're going to be talking about classroom management and just some of those habits that you need in order to build a good classroom management system. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 tips, and for part 1 today is going to be the first 5, and then come back next week if you want to hear part 2, which will have 5 more classroom management tips and tricks that I've found really useful over my 10 years of teaching. Now, it's very important for you to build a positive class culture and develop positive and professional relationships with each of your students. They need to know that you care about them. They need to be able to trust you and feel safe in your classroom. You really want to try to get to know them, because the better you know them, the better you'll be able to engage them. They'll respond a lot better to you, and it's going to feel a lot more natural and a lot easier to manage the classroom. And any misbehaviors that might come up, it'll be a lot easier to make corrections or redirections, and a lot more learning is going to happen. Now, I do want to remind you of 2 things when it comes to building positive relationships with your students, and that is that you need to build positive professional relationships with your students. You are their teacher. You are not their peer. Okay, so your relationship with your students need to be a student-teacher relationship and not a peer-to-peer relationship where you are their equal. They need to be able to trust you to prevent any bullying or misbehaviors, inappropriate teasing that's going to happen in the classroom, or that if it does happen, that you will be able to come down with appropriate consequences so that it doesn't happen again. And if you are everybody's buddy, sometimes this is just much harder because they're not going to be able to take you very seriously, or they'll think that, oh, you're not going to punish them or not follow through with consequences because you're their friend. The next thing I want to remind you about relationships is that good, true, genuine relationships take time to build. It's a long game. Good relationships are the sum of small connections and kind acts built up over time, especially when it comes to you, the teacher, and you, your students. Some of you guys might have, over 200 students or more, and you really don't have the time to sit down and have coffee with each of them or just chit chat. There are things you can do to spend more time and stretch the time you have with them, but it's just impossible when you have that many students, and it's okay. Don't be so hard on yourself. Remember, it's a long game, and what it really takes is consistency. Now, you also need to build a positive class culture where students are encouraging and uplifting each other, and I have 2 tips for you on how you can do this. So first, you want to direct, teach, and model how to give specific positive feedback, and you want to give the students opportunities to do this for one another. And you want to make sure that your feedback is actually genuine and specific, so that the students know that you really do see them. You really see them as individuals and appreciate the things that make them unique, okay? And it doesn't always have to be affirmations. You can give constructive feedback, but the way that you're giving the constructive feedback is positive and uplifting and pushing them to improve rather than putting them down, end of story. Like giving suggestions on how they can improve, or actually what's even better is using prompting questions to get them to figure out how they can improve. And this is something, again, that you want to give your students opportunities to do for one another. And the other thing you can do to start building this classroom community, positive class culture, is just involving the kids at the beginning of the year with creating your class rules and expectations. And again, those things you do want to keep short anyway, so it's not gonna, don't worry, it's not going to be like a big elaborate thing. Don't make it that way. Just you can even just take a vote. You can pre-choose which ones you want in there and then have their feedback and have a discussion with them of, well, what should the consequences be if these expectations are not met in the classroom. And trust me, a lot of students, most students are going to be very reasonable and come up with really great, amazing things, especially when you put the ball in their court and you involve them in the decision process and they feel like they're being heard and respected in this way. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful so far, please do me a favor and hit the like button. That will help the video get to other people that might appreciate it or find it useful. Thank you. Next up, you need to make sure that you're establishing procedures and routines. And really, your class procedures and routines are the backbone and framework of a good classroom management system, because they give the students a script for proper behavior. They give the students basically the formula of how to act properly in class, and they give the students a sense of what's inappropriate behavior, because those are the things that are not included in procedures and routines. Okay, and by having a consistent schedule and consistent procedures that kids can rely on, you're really cutting down a lot of the confusion, anxiety, and wasted time answering logistical questions. Next up is engagement. Engagement, engagement, engagement. You really want to make sure that your students are engaged when you have your lessons or class activities, because if they're not engaged, then they're bored, and boredom leads to misbehavior. There are many, 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 many ways to engage students, and you can get really creative. And once you know who your students are and what kind of kids they are, it actually makes it a lot easier, and you can get even more adventurous with how you engage them. But here are some important things that I've found have really worked in my years of teaching. So one, you want to make sure you connect whatever you're teaching to the real world. It gives it a lot of meaning for them, and they see like the reason why they're even doing this or why something is worth their time. Okay, second, you want to make sure you're using stories and examples with the students in them. It could be something as easy as just swapping out a name from a story with the name of someone in class. Or if you're learning history, right? One of the things I used to really like to do is have particular students play the character of the historical figures we're studying, and that actually helps them remember a lot of things better too. And then you want to make sure that you're always engaging them in meaningful tasks, not just, busy work with worksheets or whatnot. You want to make sure the work you give them is the right amount, not too much, not too little. And finally, you want to make sure that you have the proper level of difficulty. You don't want to make it too easy and you don't want to make it too hard, because either one of those, they'll just check out. Next, you want to make sure that you're timing your lectures and direct instruction appropriately. I mean, it's really hard for us adults, at least I know it is for me, to sit through someone talking at me for 30 minutes, let alone an hour straight. Imagine how hard it must be for your students. Now, studies have shown that the ideal amount of time that you can hold someone's attention is about 2 minutes for every year of age. And again, this is depending on the students you have in your classroom. So for a 10-year-old, it should be about 20 minutes, but I think even that is a little long. If you have a lot of content, you really want to make sure that you're breaking down your lessons and your lectures with a lot of movement breaks or think pair shares or interactive notes and whatnot. And I actually have a blog article that I wrote, and I'll link it down below. if you want to learn more about ways you can break up long lectures. Okay, next, you want to make sure you're using nonverbal cues and proximity as much as possible. You really want to make words or speaking out to students in front of the whole class to correct behavior or to redirect them. You want to reserve that as kind of a last resort. And the reason why is sometimes when you get caught in having to say something, well, it's disruptive, right? It's just interrupting the lesson or the work time that everyone's doing. Everyone's gonna listen like, ooh, someone's getting in trouble, that kind of thing. And then also it could be embarrassing for the students, and worse, it can be, you can get caught in just like a verbal argument and for the whole class, and maybe it's a battle you're gonna lose, and that's going to be really bad in terms of classroom management and just respect in general. So you want to make sure that you're moving your body around the room as much as possible, especially definitely during work time. Try not to be stuck behind your desk, and during lessons or when you're giving direct instruction, try to move, you know, even if you're talking. And a really great tool for this is a wireless mouse. I always said a wireless mouse because I mean, a lot of our notes are on the board, or maybe I'll have a student or different students take turn writing notes down on the whiteboard for the whole class. It's a great way to engage them too. But yeah, and if you can't move your body, make sure you've mastered the teacher look. Sometimes all you have to do is just look at them, like maybe tilt your head down a little bit and raise an eyebrow, and they'll know. It stops a lot of off-task behaviors or misbehaviors. They just know. Or having your body nearby, right? Like if you just stand next to whoever's being off-task or talking and you just stand there for a few moments, usually that works. So you want to use that as much as possible because it's a lot less disruptive, and it does not waste learning time, and it helps everyone to keep a little bit more of their dignity and does not lead to embarrassing confrontations in front of the whole class. All right, that should do it for part 1 of Classroom Management Top 10. If you want more information on some of the things I talked about today, please go ahead and check the details section of this video, and I'll have some links down below. And make sure to stay tuned for next week, part 2 of Classroom Management Top 10, while I will have 5 more tips. In the meantime, here's a video or 2 that you can watch to help you in your classroom. Have a great day.